Good evening, everybody. We're trying to figure out what's going on here. But as anybody who knows me knows, that's what I'm generally doing, trying to figure out what's going on here. Welcome to Outreach Wednesday. We're thrilled that you could be with us tonight. We want to tackle what I thought was an interesting issue, looking at as we look at issues that face the community. And if you know a teenager, or if you have a teenager, or if you remember being a teenager, or if you are a teenager, you know that can be a very difficult time in life. And even in the best of situations, it could be tough, but there are other situations where the odds are against them. And there are people out in our community who are trying desperately to make sure those kids have a chance to succeed and to grow and to prosper into productive human beings and to avoid the pitfalls that they may fall into. So to talk about that tonight, we have three very special guests who are friends of Homewood, and we're very thrilled they could be here with us tonight. We have as our guest to my immediate right, Terence Ingram, who is the founder and leader of a group called Legacy Works, which has done work with our church, partnering with them, having their meetings here and working with them to help their kids. Next to him is Madison Kearns, who is with Urban Avenues, and it's a program that has many different aspects to help community kids try to get a better start in life. And one of them is a program called Five Loaves, which we have partnered with in the past. And even though the pandemic is holding us back from doing as much as we want to do, we are still very pleased that they have them. And we also have a very special guest with us tonight, District Attorney Danny Carr. District Attorney Carr sees the issues of teens from a lot of different angles. The most obvious one, I guess, is through the criminal justice system, but he's also very active in the community to try to help those teens, to try to divert them before they see him in court. So we're very happy to have the three of them here tonight. And we just want to have a conversation about the problem that faces teenagers today in our community, and most importantly, what can be done to help them. So I want to start, Terence, if you can talk about your organization, Legacy Works, and what it does and what it's set up to do.
Okay. Well, basically, the primary issue that we've targeted is what we consider a root cause in a breakdown of family structure. That children raised in single-parent homes, particularly single-mother homes, 40% less likely to graduate from high school, 4 times as likely to be poor. And so we kind of break what we do down into 3 categories. One is what we call life coaching. We do life with young men right now only, but we do that through a Saturday enrichment program, which, as you alluded to, is hosted here. And we teach trades like woodwork and coding, financial management, agriculture, and the list goes on. We also offer financial literacy to the mothers and any other children in the family. The second category is what we consider education and advocacy. So we like to write content that we believe will pierce the minds, help the students grow social emotionally. We published our first social emotional learning workbook last year, and we've had some good success with that. We also offer a lot of tutoring services, which ramped up at the onset of the pandemic, and I think we would all understand why. And what we'd like to do moving forward with that is begin to advocate for certain policies politically that we believe will help reverse negative outcomes. And then the final thing that we do is what we call proximity and creativity. So we write original songs and music with the young men because it's one of the best ways to teach and communicate certain lessons that we want to communicate to them.
There are many aspects to what you guys do at Legacy Works, also many aspects to what Urban Avenues does to address this issue. Madison, can you talk a little bit about Urban Avenues and what it does?
Sure. So Urban Avenues, our mission is to unite disconnected communities by inspiring people to be curious and make beautiful things together. So a lot of the similar heart of we need to help students learn really valuable skills. We like to also bring in some and the creativity actually too. We focus on food and then film and photography as 2 of our main initiatives. So Five Loaves is the one that focuses all on food and the power it has to bring communities together, and then also the valuable skills you can learn through it. So we've worked with Homewood in getting to use your kitchen and having students come in from all different neighborhoods of the Birmingham area, giving them a chance to form relationships with people who may have different life experiences, different backgrounds, and getting a chance for them to come together as a group, learn alongside one another in a skill that challenges each of them in the same ways, and they're getting to learn valuable life skills like leadership and financial literacy a little bit as well, entrepreneurialism, public speaking, and they'll get to do pop-up dinners in the city too, where they get to kind of share what they've learned, get to inspire the city, the people who get to come to the pop-up dinners that they'll do alongside a local chef. Right now, we haven't been able to do those. During COVID, we've had to go digital, so our students are still getting to meet. They're getting to teach one another rather than getting to learn from local chefs. They're teaching one another life skills that they're learning and character traits that they're developing, and we all get to cook over Zoom. And then Fish Camp Films is another one that, similar heart, but all focusing on sharing their stories and the stories of their community through film and photography.
You get to cook over Zoom, but you get to eat over Zoom?
Yes, and we only get to cook or eat what we cook, so
well, okay.
yeah, a little less dangerous.
But less fulfilling too. So, District Attorney Carr, as I mentioned to you, you see this from two sides, and in just a minute we're going to show a video of some of the work you do in the community. But can you talk to us a little bit about the overall state of the teens, especially in some of our more stressed communities around Jefferson County?
Yeah, and let me first just start off by telling both of my panelists that are here today, the stuff I've just heard, that's awesome. I mean, you know, being in the position I'm in, trying to do the things which is not typical of a prosecutor, but to see the hands-on, first-hand work that you're doing, that's great. Anything that I can do, I would love to be involved, come talk to the kids, whatever it takes, let me know, first off. Second, you know, for me, and it's interesting being, you know, in the house of the Lord, because I've often told people that the rise for me to be in this position from where I'm from, you know, is nothing but God's work. And the young people that I encounter and I see on a daily basis, you look in their eyes and you don't see anything but hopelessness. You see nothing. You know, there's nothing that motivates them. You know, they don't have an outlook on, you know, on life as it relates to any fulfillment. So for me, as a prosecutor, I tell people my job, obviously, to hold people accountable for the criminal acts that they do. So if that's my primary function, that's honestly the easy part. The hard part is to try to get in front of this and also be a part of trying to stop this vicious cycle. So how do we do that? As a prosecutor, you go out in the community and although you don't be afraid for people to label you and say, oh, you're soft on crime. You can be hard on crime, but still be smart on crime. But what you have to do is have the courage to go out and talk to kids. And I'll give you a quick story because I want to put this in the mindset of the kids that we deal with on the table right now. I talked to 3 kids at a place called McAlpine about a year and a half ago. And I knew their parents. 2 of their dads were great friends of mine. They're both in prison. And I talked to them, and we walked in, and I asked them, what's the fascination about guns? Why? Just tell me. And one of the guys who was 17 raised his hand. He said, Dan, I'm going to tell you the truth. He said, the reason I pack my gun all the time is because dead people don't get out of graves, but guys who get caught with guns do get out of jail. Think about that for a moment. That's the mindset of a 17-year-old. If you think about that for a moment, it places things in perspective. So we have a lot of work to do, and from my perspective, the more they see me, they talk to a guy from the same community who walked the same streets, who had the same issues, but overcame, then hopefully I can inspire them to understand that they can be whatever they want to be. But it starts with me on both sides of that coin, on holding people accountable, but also holding myself accountable to try to be a part of the solution instead of continuing to perpetuate the problem.
We're going to try to show a video that we've obtained that kind of illustrates some of the work you do.
I have a
so
video.
Let me take a minute because James is doing this by himself tonight, so we'll give him a minute to see if we can see that video come up.
Oh. All right, video. Kind of scared on those videos. I'm like, oh. When you don't know about it, you're like, wait a minute.
We just saw James running across the room, so we think it's coming.
Good, good.
Shout out to James.
Man, what y'all are doing, that's wonderful though. I would love to be involved.
As our society strives for change, some people are going above and beyond to ensure the next generation has the guidance and opportunity to be their best. One of those people here in Birmingham, District Attorney Danny Carr, who looks to our youth to change the future.
People ask me why do I go and talk in schools all the time.
Jefferson County District Attorney Danny Carr
Why I try to go to these different boys clubs and talk.
spends a lot of his personal time
Or why I speak at a church all the time.
getting personal with the youth in his community.
I do it because I understand that a lot of the guys who, when I was young, walking back and forth to school with, it's just by the grace of God that I didn't make a stupid decision as a young man, being from my neighborhood.
Someone else made a stupid decision that changed Carr's life forever.
My little brother was murdered after graduating from high school before starting college. He was murdered solely because some guys wanted the car he was in. They took the car, and instead of just taking the car, they murdered him. So I live with that every day.
You'd think that might have hardened Danny's heart, but this DA believes every situation is not so cut and dry.
There are some young guys who did something stupid because their circumstances was just difficult. And sometimes when you're desperate, when there's no food on the table, when your utilities are not on, when your parents are not there to guide you and to mentor you and to show you that they love you and care about you. When you leave a young man to fend for himself, sometimes they get desperate and do desperate things.
As Carr shares his perspective, the young men returned the favor.
I was talking to some young men at McAlpine Park, and I asked them, I said, what's the fascination about guns? Tell me why. What is it about it? One young man raised his hand and said, Dan, I'm going to tell you. He said, man, I go to school and I have a good lunch. And then when I get home, my parents are not there. One of them, my dad is missing. My mom is on drugs. But my little sister is over there and she's crying. I flip the light switch, the light doesn't come on. And she's hungry. What am I to do? Use the quadratic equation at that point? What am I to do? So those are real life issues. And those are issues that we have to address as a society.
Carr started the District Attorney's League of Gentlemen, a mentoring program meant to fill voids in some at-risk student lives.
A lot of kids, they don't have the presence that they want, so they look for it in the wrong places. That can be not focusing in school or just going out and doing all the wrong things for all the wrong reasons.
Hoping to show them the right way.
And I truly believe that sometimes that the Lord puts you in places because he knows that you're going to make a difference.
That happened, and we want to thank WVTM 13 for allowing us to show that. Danny, you could have gone one of two ways in your life.
Right.
How do you think you avoided becoming one of those young men you talked about?
Honestly, I had a strong family upbringing. The one thing I talked about, my parents were, my mother, not my father. I'm from a single parent home in a rough neighborhood, but my mom was mom, dad, everything, but she was strong. But at the same time, I understood that I had people at the school and I had people who were not necessarily relatives, but people in the community who truly kind of filled that void and made sure that I stayed on the right path. And honestly, as a young man, I had goals. I knew what I wanted to do. I knew what I wanted to obtain. And there were people in my life that made sure that they told me and they drilled to me every day the things that I had to do, how I had to pound that pavement, how I had to stay in the straight and narrow, how decisions when you're young are going to affect you when you're older. And at some point, you hear it so much, you truly start living it. And I had those people in my life. I had people who were trying to do things like the two people here when I was a young man, and it helped me. So, because of things like that and enriching my life as a young man in a tough area, it empowered me and it gave me a sense of direction, and I used that to guide me and ultimately become what I am today.
So what's different for those young men who are out there now who take the wrong path? What's happening to them?
They're influenced by people who truly don't have their best interests at heart. In other words, sometimes they look for fulfillment in other places, like this guy said, hey, I can help you get that new pair of Jordans, or I can help you get this outfit that will make you cooler if you take this gun and you participate in this robbery. We'll get some money, we'll make that lick. You know, I can help you get rims for a car if you just do and hang with us. But you have to have someone else in this other ear making sure that you stay grounded and don't make those decisions. Because I can tell you right now, there are so many young people in the youth detention facility right now that truly don't know what hit them and don't know how they got there, other than the fact that they're there and their life has changed forever because they were influenced by people who truly didn't have their best interests at heart. So who they hang around, who they associate with, all of that stuff matters. And it's up to all of us to make sure that we give them that opportunity. We have to do it.
Terence, what do you see when these young men approach you? How do they, first of all, get involved in legacy works? And what do you see in these young men that you're working with?
So the way they get involved, I can answer that question first. We recruit, or they may know a friend who's already in the program, and the friend asks if they can join. But we go to the schools and we tell them what we do, the schools that we have relationships with, and we ask them to make recommendations about who they think would be a good fit for our program. And then as more and more people hear about us, they make similar recommendations. In terms of what I see in them, what do you mean by that?
Well, obviously they're at a crossroads in life. Mm-hmm. What can be done to stop them from taking the wrong route? And can you tell which ones may be heading that way when they come to you?
You can, but you know, I'm just going to be perfectly honest and say it's a very complex issue. And there's a lot of diversity even amongst the young men that we serve. Like Mr. Carr said, he was raised by a single mother, but his mother instilled values and she stayed on them. Well, you know, all single mothers are not created equally, right. But the child can be in a two-parent home, right. And not necessarily get all that he needs. So that's what I really want to say first, is that it's very complex, and a lot of it we're still figuring out as we go. Mm-hmm. But we have identified what I call 4 deficits. We look at an education deficit, a values deficit, we call it a policy deficit, and a proximity deficit. And what we try to do is instill or implement programs that address each of those deficits. So with education, that's why we talked about Saturday enrichment and teaching them the trades. That's why we do the tutoring. With values, we got a lot of things that we're trying to do coming down the pike, but that was the impetus behind the social emotional curricula and connecting them with different people that we know and others that we don't know who can instill those values. And then with the proximity or the policy deficit, we haven't really done that yet, but we're beginning to realize that there are certain policies, governmentally speaking, that perpetuate some of these negative circumstances that we're talking about. That's the only reason we want to enter that space, because we have no desire to be in politics otherwise. And
good move on your part. So.
And then proximity. You know, one of the interesting things that's happened, and please, Willie, get me back on track if I go off a track. But
we have no track here, so go ahead.
Okay, fantastic. But one of the things that we found that has happened is when people of color do better, they tend to exit the communities that are suffering. And that's no judgment on anyone, because people can do what they want. But we're trying to get back into those communities and encourage other people to do so as well, and start community centers in the areas of greatest need. So that's some of what we do to address the issues that we see. There is also a certain philosophy that we push, because statistically we found that there are 5 things that help young black men specifically enter into the middle class, and so we push that. That's education, which I referred to earlier. Marriage is one, so we talk to the young men about marriage consistently, because for whatever reason, that is something that really helps young black men do well. Military service is another. Church attendance, we do take them to church as often as we possibly can. And then the last one is a sense of personal agency, the idea that my choices actually do determine my outcomes in life. That life is not being forced upon me. I have some say based upon my decisions and what happens in life.
Madison, Urban Avenues does this uplifting and enrichment through food and through video work. Why those two areas? Why do you think those two areas are ones that can be so helpful to these teens?
Well, one of the main reasons when deciding on what kind of creative initiatives to lean into, Mr. Carr, you kind of touched on about the influences in our lives and just how important they are. And so how do we find a strong network of people who can be really positive influences on our students? And you look at Birmingham and you see a very dynamic food community. You see a lot of really creative visual artists who are doing great work in the city as well. And so those were two of the areas that it was here. We knew people that could lean into it, and we also saw the power of those two different specialties, I guess you could call them, that really can have profound impact on people. Because, you know, talking about students who may not have as many opportunities, or if we think about their vision that they have, if they don't know where they want to go in their careers and further in life, then they're really sustainable career opportunities for them in film and in food and photography, or in film and photography and in food. And then also by working with these groups, we're able to teach them the value of networking, which I think has a ton of opportunity, like leaning into that influence narrative as well. Networking is something that is not always instilled across different socioeconomic classes, or different schools even have the opportunity to be able to educate students on the value of it. And so those are a couple of the reasons why we decided to go in them. And they're also very community engaging. You know, food is such a communal act of coming together at the table, getting to all cook in the kitchen. You know, there's so much history that plays into being in the kitchen together, eating at the same table with others. And then same with film and photography. It loops you in, it shares someone's personal story, but it also has so many elements that pull in other people as well.
None of you operates what I think you could qualify as faith-based programs or initiatives, but faith plays a role, I think, in what all of you do. Can you all talk about the role of faith and religion in helping teens get those sense of values or to guide them in the right way? How does that impact them? And how do you intertwine that into what the message is of empowerment for teens? And that's a jump ball question. So.
Okay. I'm looking to you, sir.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, well, you know, the faith actually is obviously huge in my life. So any young man that I'm mentoring through a mentor group called the District Attorney League of Gentlemen, that was a part of that piece, you know, we talk about faith. And I find out that many of those guys have never stepped foot in a church. So, you know, we prepare to take them to church, take them to not just one church, obviously my own church, but other services as well. We also look to have pastors that I know come and visit the guys outside of the church doors and talk to them also. You know, because I want them to understand that, you know, faith is bigger than just that moment that they're in the church. You know, it's bigger than that, it's broader than that. So I want them to understand the full spectrum of that. However, I don't necessarily try to force anything on them, but I want them to understand how faith can help them and give them that strength that they don't necessarily think they have. And when you introduce them, oftentimes we have conversations about it. You know, it's generalized conversations like, you know, how do you feel when you're sitting in church? How do you feel when you're leaving? When you pray, how do you pray? What do you expect to gain and get? So we have those conversations with our young men, but it does play a huge role, obviously, in my life, and I try to impart that on the young men that I talk to in schools or anywhere. I try to impart that on their parents as well. So I think we need to do more of that in our communities. We really do. Because in my community, there's a church on every corner. Every corner. You know, may not necessarily be full, but it's one on every corner. So, you know, I try to tell them, hey, just get in one. You know, try it out. So, yeah.
Yeah.
Terence, how's that playing into this issue of values that you're trying to work on?
Yeah, that's exactly what I was about to speak to. So, you know, you have to have a values funnel, you know, and when you're from a home that may be broken or from a home where that values funnel is not necessarily there from the parent to the child, you have to wonder, where are the values coming from? Because they're coming from somewhere. So really, when we bring some of the boys to church or we take them on certain faith-based visits, it's more practical than it is, you know, us trying to proselytize them. Because when you get in a good church, one of the things that will happen is, number one, there will be a values funnel from the pulpit to the pew. But then in the community of people that you're surrounded with, that values funnel will be demonstrated. And so that's two things that we really try to harp on, is that faith is practical. So, you know, it's not necessarily about all of the, you know, the religious traditions and whatnot that some people associate with faith, but it's truly about values, and it's truly about you connecting with something that will give you hope. Because he spoke to hopelessness earlier, you've spoken to it to some degree. You know, you really can't talk about faith without talking about hope, a vision, something greater for the future, and that's particularly important when you're dealing with somebody who is constantly bombarded with hopelessness.
Madison, I have to believe that the pandemic has done a number on the efforts of you and other organizations right now. Can you tell me how COVID has affected what you're able to do in the community? And can you tell me, has this set your efforts back at all, and how you see it going forward?
I think in terms of being able to go into schools and bring in new students by just getting that first introduction has been challenging, and by challenging I mean doors are shut. You know, there's you can't quite go into a school, so we've been able to really focus on the students that have been a part of our programs for like from the past year, which has been really special, and empowering them and challenging them to bring in friends and people in their lives that also need to be a part of. 5 Loaves, for instance. So yeah, we're meeting over Zoom. We still have the consistency that we would have. We are getting kind of more directed interaction with them, even though it's not quite in the normal sense of what we'd love to have, but still getting chances to really engage in the conversations that we have, because we always try to have in a training night, which is, you know, every 3 weeks in a kitchen, where we would normally be in your kitchen and cooking some kind of meal that then ties into a life skill or a character trait that we're trying to foster. We have been empowering the students to lead those. So the student will lead a cooking class and then also talk about something that they're working through. And so last night we had one. We were making pastry cream and talking about how do we pursue good in our lives. You know, there's a lot of people who are pursuing things these days, and so figuring out what does that actually look like in our lives as we're trying to pursue what good is, and so we were talking through how we see that in our relationships and loving people in our lives well, and we were talking about how we do it as a group, and they were talking. One of the students shared how in COVID, they've been able to see the structure a little laid out more. You know, I try to keep it a little nuanced, you know, trick the students a little bit, not quite, but you know, you're in the kitchen more, you're having fun all together. There's more distractions, whereas in this time being online, we've had pretty direct focus on this is what we're trying to do. We're still trying to better ourselves, even though things are completely different than how we'd like it. So that's how 5 Loaves has been going. Fish Camp Films, we had a completely virtual summer camp, which was interesting and really focusing on the power of storytelling. And there were some good in that we were able to have teachers from all across the United States. We had some from California and Florida and Vermont, all over the place, that were able to teach the students. So that was a unique benefit we were able to see. And the students were able to get into their families more for the challenges that we would give them to really practice the skills. So they were getting to interview family members and really get to dive into that in deeper levels.
You know, Mr. Carr, it seems that this pandemic is leading to more violence, more crime, people being stuck. I'm not sure what the reasons are, but perhaps you can explain. How is this impacting the crime scene in Jefferson County? And do you see a setting back the efforts to help people in the way that you all want to do?
You know, I'll tell you that there are different categories of crime, but if we're focusing on the violent crime, I can tell you that specifically that the numbers relative to domestic violence has increased. We can see that from the filing of what's called protection from abuse petitions at family court. They've increased, they've doubled. And that's because people are home during the COVID and they're, quarantining and their issues. So we've seen that. Now, strangely, and I would be the first to say, I didn't think that the gun violence would be as abundant as it has been even during this pandemic. And that's, again, because people are asked to stay home and social distance and don't do this and don't do that. And again, people are disregarding that, especially young people. But I think at the same time, jobs and families are having a tough time. Again, that's another element or another aspect of the helplessness that I'm talking about in certain communities. So that plays a part in it. Whether people want to admit it or not, that plays a huge role. But I don't know what the stats will look like post-COVID. It's hard to anticipate that. But what I can say is, our efforts have been diverted a little bit because of COVID. But, as far as courts and all of that stuff, we're doing some stuff virtually in courts. But at the same time, we're not able to have trials and things of that nature because you can't have them virtually, obviously. I know they show that on television, but in real life, because of what's called the Constitution and the rule of law and the evidence, you can't do that in real life. But
You mean TV's not real?
no,
Oh man,
it's Hollywood. It's Hollywood. But yeah, crime is still on the uptick, and honestly, at this point, I don't see it slowing down at this moment. To be totally honest with you, what that one thing is, I don't know, but I can tell you because of COVID, because of the economic downturn, because there are lesser jobs, because people are being laid off, because kids are not in school, all those things play a role. They play a role. So we have to get a handle on it quickly, in my opinion, and hopefully we do with this vaccine rolling out.
So clearly the need to have programs and initiatives to help these teens isn't going away. And I think the goal of all of these programs and all the work that you guys do is to transform lives. And I'm wondering if you can share with me, each of you, a story of a life or a person whose life has been touched or changed in a way through the efforts to intervene with them before it's too late. And Terence, can I start with you on that?
Yeah. One immediately comes to mind, and I'm particularly proud of this one because it happened organically and naturally. It was not forced. But there's one young man in our program who came to us from the Woodlawn community. And he joined our program. He began participating in the Saturday enrichment courses, and we began spending a lot of time with them just doing what we call life. So going out to eat, just picking them up, taking them down the street, just talking, whatever the case may be. Well, there was one night in particular where we were talking, and he just came right out and asked me, can I be baptized?
Wow.
Right, so something along the way had flipped in his mind where he saw a person or an event or some kind of circumstance that made him want to make a life change. And I initially said no. Well, I didn't say no, but I questioned him. to make sure he understood what he was asking. And after question after question after question, then he went to his to a local church that's in his neighborhood. That pastor there asked him several questions. It was authentic and it was real, and he ultimately ended up getting baptized.
Wow. It's hard to top that one, but that's
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
definitely a major one.
Man, so what kind of transformations have you seen in the work you've done with these kids?
Yeah, it is hard to come after that one. But it's always so encouraging and enlightening to be able to see the students have that aha moment. None that I've experienced that have led to someone coming to Christ, but those moments of where they feel like the thing that they can create matters and has value. And one of my one of my students, Jayla, she's always been incredible. And she's been part of the program for years now, and I've seen her be able to grow, become a mentor to the younger students. She's been able to publish her own book, which is incredible.
That's
yeah,
amazing.
And so all of these things where, I don't think that, it's multiple influences in her life that have contributed to this, but being able to continue to be a place where she can come in, feel comforted, feel supported, feel encouraged to pursue her dreams has been one that I've loved getting to witness through the years. Kind of one of our alumni, his name's Terence, and he is incredible, and he's always told some great stories about. He was born and raised in Fairfield. He'll be the one to tell people that how life could have turned out for him. He joined Five Loaves as one of our first students years ago, and he formed connections, took that chance, followed in and took that initiative that took control of his own life, like you were talking about earlier, which I loved. I think it's so profound and great. And then also, getting to utilize the connections he made through Five Loaves, and he's been able to move through management with one of the connections he made through his work with Five Loaves, which is so incredible. Now he'll come and he'll get to teach the kids, and he leads practically sermons that I get to just listen in on, which is great. But yeah, so it is always fun to see people get the confidence in themselves, see the value in themselves that was there. They just needed someone to be able to help remind them that it was, and maybe connect them to the next step for them to say yes. So those are a couple that come to mind.
Awesome. I bought some just because I think this is actually interesting. I have two quick stories from a vantage point of school truancy. That's one of the things that I wanted to tackle, which was strange. As a district attorney, a lot of people looked at me crazy, like, why are you worried about school attendance? Well, we know the pipeline to prison is real. We know that. So we initiated what's called a Helping Families Initiative, and we're in 25 Birmingham City schools. And what it is we want to get to the root cause of why a kid is chronically absent and missing school. And then we provide wraparound services for that kid and for that family, because you can't help the kid unless you help the family. Well, after initiating, I got some numbers here because I thought this was interesting, real numbers. Unexcused absences, how we reduced them through the Helping Families Initiative. Southampton K through 8, okay? March 5th, 2019, for that year cycle, they had 3,098 unexcused absences.
Wow.
In 1 year. So from March 5th, 2019, 3,098 unexcused absences. A year of us being in the school, March 6, 2020, it was down to 2,149 absences. That's a difference of 949 days, which equals 6,643 hours of learning time.
Wow.
And we have that list through for all the schools. That is not a one ha-ha moment, but that is a continuation of dealing with that pipeline in prison, keeping kids in school, keeping kids out of the streets. And we're doing it at all the schools. But I want to take it a step further. Another thing I wanted to do, people again said I was crazy. I want to do what's called a second chance job fair. Why is that important? If you want to tackle crime, you have to change the trajectory of a person's life. And we're talking adults too. So what I did was, got a bunch of employers who were hire felons. I went and spoke at St. Clair Correctional Facility in the prison, and I put together a job fair. This is the first one I did in 2019. I've done 4 since. But this one, we had 584 job seekers come to the Boutwell. And in that day, we had 152 people placed. And the most interesting part of this was that a guy came to my office who was in St. Clair, attended this job fair, and had his daughter and his fiance with him. And he said, I just want to show you my first paycheck from your job fair. And he was crying. And he said, I'm going to pay this forward. I'm going to go talk to the other young men about not going down the path I'm going down. And he had tears in his eyes. He said, for the first time, I take my daughter and my fiance out to dinner, man. This has changed my life. So things like that for me are the stuff when I'm talking about not being typical, but being atypical and having the courage to do things different to try to change the system as a whole. So.
Doesn't sound crazy. It sounds creative to me and very impactful.
Absolutely.
As we wrap up this conversation, one of the things I always want to try to leave as a takeaway for people who may be watching and for members of this congregation is what can be done, what can citizens do, what can people do to help the situation? What suggestions do you guys have for what the average person can do to help these young people go down the right path? Aside from giving money to your organizations, but aside from that, Madison, what would you suggest?
I would say, the first thing, honestly, that comes to mind is just ask good questions. That's typically how I try to approach a lot of aspects of my life. But I think that so many of the things that you all have hit on about really investing in someone starts with asking good questions and taking the time to notice. And so, I think supporting organizations like Legacy Works and hopefully Urban Avenues, and all of these, there's so many great groups across the city who are doing wonderful things with young adults. But I think the first step happens so often like in your home and in the connections and in the circles that you're a part of, if it's church, if you have a large family network, what other areas you're involved in your community.
Terence, what would you say? What advice would you give?
Yeah, well, two things come to mind. I think there are some passive things we can do and there are some active things we can do. One of the passive things that a person can do, if I can call it that, is suspend judgment. I think a lot of times we have preconceived notions about certain populations, certain communities that we've developed that are not based on any kind of factual information. They're based on just conjecture and what we believe things should look like. And if they don't look that way, we create meaning in our minds as to why things happen the way they do. So I would encourage that. And then the second thing I would encourage is proximity, to get close to the issue, which will help with the first in suspending judgment, whether it's volunteering at a school, volunteering for an organization like ours, or even Five Loaves or Urban Avenues, but getting as close to the issue that needs to be solved as possible. Because when you get close to it, you see in a different way and on a different level what really may be going on and how much you can really do that you may not have thought you could do before.
Mr. District Attorney, what do you think?
I think people need to first sit down and think to themselves why you're blessed. You're blessed because the Lord knows that you're going to be a blessing to others. And if you think about that for a minute, that means take your blessings, grab someone, bring them along, get involved in whatever little way. If it's getting involved with a young man or woman personally to guide them along, do that. Mm-hmm. Make it a point to do that. If it's helping organizations like both of these organizations, financially or whatever, or your sweat equity, whatever it is, do that. Use that blessing to be a blessing, because I often tell people, ability is a poor man's worth. And we all had ability to help someone or to be a part of a solution. But you have to be willing to do it. You have to be willing to pound that pavement, and you have to have the courage to get out and know that you can make a difference, recognize it, and do it. And the hard part is getting up and doing it and getting involved. And once you get involved, it can be addictive. And then next thing you know, you want to know what else I can do and what else I can do and why did I wait so long? But you have to know and have that fire burning inside, and every one of us do. Each and every one of us have the ability. Mm-hmm. That's why each and every one of us, even if you're poor, you're still wealthy. So we just have to make sure we utilize it.
You guys are great. Thank you so much for taking the time and spending time with us, and we're grateful to be associated with all of you and hope that you'll be able come back and spend some time with us again, because I think it's very important what we're talking about. And there's a lot of issues out there to deal with, and we can all deal one at a time. That's the way to get it going. So thank you all very much for being here tonight.
Thank you,
Thank
sir.
you.
Next month, Outreach Wednesday, as many of you know, the church is going through a visioning process right now. What is going to be our vision for the next 10 years? And we want you to be part of that process. So next month, we're going to bring in some hard-to-get guests. I will tell you, there's some guy named Brett, who's our preacher, and a couple of shepherds. We may have to pay a little extra to get them to come here, but they will be here next month to talk about the issues around the visioning process, how you can get involved, and what's being done to take care of that right now. So come back next month, the second Wednesday of February 13th, and we hope to see you then. And Terence, would you pray us out tonight, please?
Absolutely. Let's pray. Father God, we thank you so much for being who you are. We acknowledge that you're marvelous, that you're wonderful, that there is nobody like you. God, we even want to thank you for having this in mind, for bringing all of us together this evening and allowing us to talk about something that we know is near and dear to your heart. God, I pray, even as the Lord Jesus told his disciples, to pray to the Lord of the harvest for laborers, because the harvest is plentiful, but the laborers are few. And if anything comes out of this tonight, God, I pray that it would be a rising up of laborers, that those who are willing to go into the harvest field, God, will be ignited and invigorated to do so. I thank you for the panelists that were here tonight, God. I pray that you would bless them from the top of their head to the sole of their feet, that all things would be well with them as they put their hand to the plow, that they won't look back, God, and that you'll bless them for the work that they do, and after you've blessed them, that you'll bless them again. God, we pray a special blessing over Homewood Church of Christ, God, that you will increase this church financially, numerically, spiritually, emotionally, in every way imaginable, so that they continue to be a blessing to the community, those who are in Birmingham and even beyond. And finally, God, we want to declare that yours is the kingdom and the power and the glory, and it's going to be that way forever and ever. And to that end, we say, in Jesus' name, amen.
Amen. Thank you, everybody. Thanks for joining us. We'll see you next month.